None.
Well, hello, everybody. We're back with Evolving Souls Zoomcast number 5. And I'm delighted to be back with you. I've been on the road. I'm now in Portland. I've been teaching the sort of the basic ideas of my book, going all the way up from through Shasta, Mount Shasta, then to Asheville, Medford. Yesterday, I was with the Urantia group of Portland and taught ideas from my book, but because I'm anticipating what's happening today, I introduced Dustin's ideas, which were very helpful in my own work in trying to interpret the Urantia book's teaching about consciousness. And so lo and behold, here is Dustin DiPerna, who's with us today. Dustin's a friend of mine from many years back. We've seen each other in the community of integral theorists, integral practitioners in the Bay Area. Dustin lives in the Bay Area, and over the years we've had brief encounters and discussions of the Urantia revelation, and I found out that he has some interest in it, and in addition has worked with theosophy and just wrote a book reinterpreting theosophy, Alice Bailey and all of those teachers, Blavatsky, in terms of the new integral theory. And I hadn't read it, but I'm intrigued because it's kind of what I did in my book, Your Evolving Soul. So to that extent, Dustin and I are on the same page in trying to translate older lineages into something which he calls translineage. I like the term transcultural. It's really the same idea, but translineage is very helpful because you want to focus on these great traditions, and the Urantia book is a tradition. It's a budding tradition. I want to focus on these great traditions in a way that we can transcend them, but include their wisdom. And if we focus on practitioner lineages, then we get a lot further because you're not so tied up in mythic notions or doctrines of religions, which are an important part of these religions, but we want to look more at the esoteric side of any tradition. And that's part of my intention today of coming to more of the esoteric side of the Urantia revelation. So I want to just pause here for us to form that intention. And if you guys would just close your eyes with me and join with me in an intention and in a prayer for us to really focus in and center in on what is the transcultural meaning of the Urantia revelation, number one. Number two, how we can pull from Dustin's very advanced work in this and get into a good dialogue with Dustin so we can illuminate our own practices, our own spiritual practices. Also, a third intention is to open doors for Spirit to come into us through the next hour and a half, whatever it may turn out to be, for Spirit to infuse our bodies, our minds, our hearts, our souls, and guide this discussion. So let's have a moment of silence to bring that home. You can almost do that all day, but let's get to our discussion, everyone. And again, those of you who are just logging on, thank you so much for coming. I'm with Dustin DiPerna. Dustin is the author of 3 books and editor of others, and I'm sure many books to come. The book that I know well is called Streams of Wisdom. His second book, if I'm correct, is Evolution's Ally, and his newest book is Earth is Eden. And his work is, as I mentioned at the top, is in finding a language and a point of view on the world's wisdom traditions that is transcultural, translineage, and which can, as I understand it, can move us toward a kind of global spirituality, which is not New Age spirituality, which is, we need to distinguish what Dustin is doing from the New Age impulse, which is an eclectic impulse of having a big soup, and you just throw these things into the soup and see what you can distill from it. And often a New Age spirituality is tied up in commercialism, in my view, as a publisher of New Age books. I've noticed that to be the case, and I've tried to avoid it as much as possible. It's difficult to do that because there's all this pressure on publishers and on people in media to sort of dumb it down, so to speak, so that you can get a bigger audience. And that's just never been what I wanted to do. And so that's why being a publisher for me today is a volunteer activity, because we can't get with the kind of audiences we have today. And by the way, Dustin's also a publisher. He knows what I'm talking about. The audiences we have today, really need to be up-leveled to a place where they can do this kind of integrative spirituality that we're talking about. So in my work, I've tried to show that integrative thought or integral theory it can be in dialogue with the Urantia revelation, because the Urantia book actually is all inclusive of all the disciplines, just like integral theory. The Urantia book has really every discipline. It's got science, it's got philosophy, it's got religion, it's got sociology, it's got politics, it's got history. I mean, how could they do such a thing to us? But they did, and they wrote a seamless discourse that integrates all these disciplines, and purportedly from higher beings as the authors. But as I was pointing out to Dustin, it's like we're in a lineage with the celestials, you see. So the Urantia book is letting their spiritual teaching come into dialogue with ours. And in particular, the celestials purport to have read all of our literature, not just spiritual, religious, but also scientific and philosophic, and then extracted the best ideas from our human traditions, and then populated those ideas into the Urantia book. And it says there's several thousand of these ideas of human origin, which are in the text, but they don't footnote them. But most of them have been discovered, I don't know if you know this, Dustin, by Urantians who found passages from, like Hegel and from Plato and Aristotle. They're literally lifted out and paraphrased. And sometimes they're almost word for word. And I found a phrase that's from the poet John Keats. It's like straight out of John Keats. It's a very important one, actually, that I quote in my book. So they do this because they're weaving together our traditions and then up-leveling them with the galactic traditions, you might say, of spirituality, cosmology. So with that preface, I just want to say a little bit more about Dustin, because there's so much to say about Dustin. In addition to being a lifelong student of religion, he is also an entrepreneur and has not just a publishing company, but sort of a teaching company. And tell us a bit about your enterprises, if you will, to get us started, Dustin.
Sure, Byron, thank you. And I just want to say it's such an honor to be here. And every time we have a dialogue, I find it deeply enriching. And I love your new book. I love what you're doing. I love this idea of really being a translator for texts and for teachings and for lineages and making them really relevant for this moment in time. And I mean, you've been my main guru when it comes to the Urantia. So I look to you, and I feel very fortunate, and I feel happy to be having this conversation with you. So thank you again for the invitation. So for me, I love also this idea of taking things into more of a galactic framework, because often what I like to do in a lot of the ways that I frame what I do is I like to use galactic metaphors. So maybe just as an opening, maybe let me just use a galactic metaphor to unpack a bit about some of my more entrepreneurial side. But in reality, my deeper spiritual practitioner side and my entrepreneurial side are deeply one. So I'll share a bit about that. So a number of years ago, I was with my friend Bruce Lyon, And Bruce Lyon is a teacher within the Trans-Himalayan teachings, which are the evolution of Alice Bailey and Blavatsky and those teachings of theosophy. And we were in Egypt at the pyramids at Giza. We were sitting on top of a roof, and we were looking out over the pyramids at night. They're being lit up with all these beautiful lights, and it was quite a scene. But it feels fitting in a certain way. This was the setting that we engaged in. And he said to me, you know, I've always seen integral theory as the dark matter, and it provides the space for all of these teachings and all of these lineages and all of these stars to shine, and for entire galaxies to shine, and for super galaxies to shine. And I really like that metaphor. And I'm sure we'll speak a bit about integral frameworks and integral theory in general, but I really like the idea of creating some sort of dark matter or some sort of field within which galaxies and stars and teachings can shine. And I really feel like that's a little bit what you and I do, is that both as publishers and as entrepreneurs in the world and as teachers and as authors, we do our best to hold open that field of dark matter so that stars and galaxies can shine all in their own right and in their own place. And I do a bit of that as an entrepreneur, as a book publisher, as an author, that kind of thing.
Beautifully well said. So let's take a journey into the galaxy and see what we find there. And I'm not sure where to start, but our initial intention, I think, was to illuminate the vectors, as you call them.
Right. Sure.
I want to say a couple of things by way of preface.
Please.
That in what I discovered in the Urantia text is they have implicit these vectors that you're talking about. And it's more like the stages of faith that you're familiar with from work. They use the language of faith, but we can translate that at least into two vectors in the Urantia revelation, which is faith as the feeling relationship to reality. So faith is not a set of propositions you believe in. That's not faith, that's belief, right? That's a philosophical set of doctrines, you might say. So the refinement of your faith, going through stages of faith, is the equivalent, I think, of the waking up that you talk about, that Ken Wilber talks about. Not sure about that though. So that's one part of this. The other part of it that I was kind of amazed once I got into the study in my 41st year, I was reading the Urantia Book. That's how long it takes to was out. Is that they see growth in terms of the soul, an entity that grows. It's substantive entity. It's ontological entity that's growing because of our experience, and it grows in two axes. One axis is quantitative growth of the soul. So just the amount and how wide-ranging your experience is, and the amount of the experience you have. So that's quantitative growth. And then qualitative growth is akin to your faith, the growth of your feeling relationship. But it's inclusive of that, but it's bigger than that. It's sort of it's the quality of your consciousness that leads to decisions that then build the soul. That literally, when you make decisions that are true decisions, there's like an addition of substance to the soul. It's literally like a saving of that experience in and as the soul. So they're really tracking soul growth through these two axes. They're not all that explicit, but I am in my book because I'm working with integral theory. Help me with that. So those are some language from the Urantia Book that I want to introduce and maybe carefully and cautiously enter into dialogue with you about what you have discovered working with Daniel Brown and Ken Wilber on that. So I'm going to let you launch into that.
All right, excellent, Byron. Thank you. So maybe the best place to start is that you've given a little bit of preface. So let me give a little bit of the framing of how I've understood these various vectors. And then maybe through dialogue, we can find out where there's the deepest overlap with each, rather than starting to do that from the beginning. Let me start with sort of my camp first. So I feel so lucky, Byron. I've had this opportunity to study with some of the most amazing teachers of our time, at least the most amazing English speakers of our time. And one of those is Ken Wilber, who we've mentioned in passing with regard to integral theory. And the other is Daniel P. Brown. And Daniel Brown was my thesis advisor at Harvard. He's been at Harvard for 40 years and is really an incredible bridge builder between Western psych and the Tibetan teachings. I always jokingly say the Tibetan culture is like the Silicon Valley of the East. So anytime we combine sort of the Silicon Valley of the mind and of the East with the sort of institution like Harvard, we're going to get something really juicy that comes out of it. So what I'd like to share with you comes both from my exposure to Ken Wilber's work, Daniel P. Brown's work, and then also my own training in religious studies and studying psychology in general. So a really easy way to frame this is making just two distinctions at first, and that's that there's a really key difference between what we call waking up and growing up. And in simplest terms, when we look at the path that might be articulated in some of the Eastern traditions about moving from a place of separation or individuation to a place of unity or non-duality, we would consider that waking up. If we want to look at how that arises within some of the Western traditions, we would say that as we have this relationship with the divine, a relationship with God, there are ways in which we can refine that direct experience more and more to a point of indistinct union, is one of the terms that's sometimes used. The Sufis, as you know, they use this term supreme identity, that we begin to recognize this deepest aspect of oneself as the supreme identity. One of the clearest articulations of that particular view comes from Ibn Arabi. So whatever the case might be, there's something about coming from a more dualistic or separative understanding of the world to directly experiencing a world that starts to become more and more interconnected, interdependent, and eventually indistinct from one's own awareness. That there is this sort of union that unfolds over time. We call that waking up. In the books that I've done and in the practices that I've done with Daniel P. Brown and Wilber's work. That's very different than what we might call growing up. And the simplest way to articulate growing up is the ways by which we as human beings grow through a series of simple and predictable stages. And those stages begin with, in the simplest framework, we start off egocentric. We then would move into a framework that's ethnocentric, and then to one that's world-centric, and then perhaps eventually cosmocentric. One of the things I love about the Urantia teachings is that they come from this cosmocentric perspective, that they take us out of not only our own ego or not only our own group, not only humanity, but from a really cosmic perspective. I think that's a beautiful gift that comes through the Urantia lineage. But the reason that these two are so important to distinguish between is that we could have someone who's progressing a bit along one of these paths, say the path of waking up, but in fact isn't progressing along the path of growing up. And if someone has a spiritual experience where they feel like they're experiencing something of the divine, something of God, but they're coming through a lens that's ethnocentric, what would tend to happen is that they would interpret that experience through an ethnocentric lens and therefore be more fully convinced that their religion or their path is the only right path. So in fact, esoteric experience could reinforce ethnocentric views. So there's some danger there. Vice versa, the same is true. We could be living from a world-centric perspective, or perhaps even a cosmocentric perspective, but still feel very separate, but have no degree of this sense of union or this sense of non-duality. So these vectors, at the minimum, are things that we see separately. I sometimes add a bit more in there around this vector of states of consciousness and show how that's different. But I think for the simplicity purposes of just starting the dialogue, I think it's good to just say waking up and growing up, because then maybe we can bridge a bit further together. So I can pause, or I can try to start making some bridges. You tell me where you want to go there.
Yeah, let's see. So waking up, I'm going to refer to the biography of Jesus in the Urantia Book, which is 700.
Great.
It's an external third-person biography. It's not obviously it's not his autobiography, so you don't know exactly what he's experiencing inside. But those who are narrating it are the angels that were present, so they have access to his states of consciousness, and they track you through his growing up, and they fill in so much more detail than we have ever known to show that he grew up in this very holistic way, because he was both a deeply feeling person, but he was also a highly competent person. He acquired all kinds of skills that we don't know about from the Bible. But meanwhile, he was very frequently going off for meditation. In Urantia, they call it worship and communion. But at a certain point in the text, they say, this is meditation, but they don't emphasize that so much. But it truly is. And so what I find inspiring about his life, and can translate in what we're talking about here, is here's a guy that's waking up and growing up in the most ideal fashion. He's a guy who's a householder. I don't know if you know this part of it, that his dad died, Joseph died when he was 15. So Jesus had to take care of the family as the eldest in a Jewish family. He became like the father of the family. And there were 8 siblings younger than him. So he actually was a householder until he was aged, I think, 29 or 27, something like that. So he had to be the breadwinner in that home. And he had to develop skills, not just carpentry, but other skills, such as being a blacksmith, working with leather, and running a business. He actually ran a business where people came into the shop, and he did all kinds of repair work on their equipment, and also built all sorts of things with wood. And so anyway, the point being that he was growing in his skills. Also, he mastered 3 languages: his native language, Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. So he was trilingual. So he's a guy who's not just a mystic. He's not just a mystic who's out in the desert having altered states of consciousness. He's actually interacting all the time, and building and growing a family, building a business, and then expanding out from there into the Mediterranean world, and traveling all through the Mediterranean as an assistant to an Indian merchant and a translator. So this is all these lost years. So the reason I say this is you're getting a depiction of a person who's growing up into a world-centric view of things until
Absolutely.
the point where he realizes that he's an incarnation, which is fairly early. And so he's beginning to have converse with the cosmos, with higher beings. So this is the depiction that we Urantians work with of somebody growing up into cosmocentric awareness. But as far as his waking up, we don't learn too much. And so I just want to throw that in as
great
as grist for the mill for the discussion.
Yeah, wonderful. So, I mean, as far as waking up goes, I'd be curious what Urantia says, but we know for sure that some of these statements are pretty profound, that Jesus has made are pretty profound waking up statements. So, I and the Father are one. Before Abraham was, I am. These kind of things point to an ever-present sense of self or sense of identity that's always been here, that's never not been here, that has a deep sense of knowing that the Father consciousness and the Son consciousness are actually not different. And these are all things that, taken in different contexts, are very interesting when we start to look at it from a trans-lineage perspective. So I'd be curious, Byron, when we look at the Urantia book and what it says about some of those statements and things like that, how are things framed? And are those picked up in a way that feels like it highlights those as important, statements like that?
There's a narration of his life in the part 4, but in other parts, in part 3 in particular, they give you the kind of a theory of consciousness. And that's what I think I broached with you, and it's in my book, about the 7 circles of consciousness.
Yep.
They call them the psychic circles, but the word psychic means something different here. So there are these 7 levels that as you progress and traverse these levels, you get to a non-dual state of consciousness, which is level 1. And then after level 1, you can move toward what they call God fusion. So you might say level 1 is enlightenment, total like Buddha's enlightenment. And then a step beyond that is the stage that Enoch and Elijah in the Bible, according to the Urantia book, are the only 2 that went beyond that to this fusion state with the indwelling spirit, where the body combusts, actually the body disappears. somewhat like the rainbow body experience in Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah.
So the disappearance of the person, in the Urantia view, the terminology or cosmology, the person's soul is ascending to the next world, the next dimension, and they don't reincarnate. So that's a
let's pick that up, Byron, because I think there's some really juicy stuff there. I remember the first time that I started to hear about the rainbow body teachings, which I'd like to say a bit about. We don't know a lot about in the West, but we know a little bit about them. The first time I heard those teachings, I immediately had this flash of Christ, of Jesus, and recognizing that perhaps what was referred to as the resurrection was simply a manifestation of what the Tibetans call rainbow body. And so those links are very interesting, particularly knowing that the Urantia book places something beyond that initial sort of first level or first ring of non-duality or awakening. So I'll say just a little bit about what we know from the Tibetan teachings, and this is the generous gifts that I've received from Dan Brown, in that the Tibetans make a distinction between awakening and enlightenment. And they would say that the path of Mahamudra, the great seal or the great gesture, which is a beautiful word, it means that all of reality is seen as one single gesture, this Mahamudra. That the path of Mahamudra helps take somebody from everyday ordinary consciousness, step by step, in a very sequential way, to then gain their first taste of awakening. So we call that first taste of non-duality, but it's not only non-duality, we have gradations of non-duality. So this is a very refined version of non-duality where one wakes up beyond individual consciousness to an undivided, unbounded wholeness. So Mahamudra is really good about that path. But then the Tibetans say that the path that's better next is Dzogchen. And Dzogchen means great completion. It means coming to see all of reality as a single perfection. And in that path, that's about stabilizing that awakening. It's about stabilizing that sense of awakening all the time. And it wouldn't be said until you've stabilized that all the time that you would then take the third map or the third path where you'd start to then exhaust karma. And by taking very particular views with a stable awakening, you start to exhaust karma in such a way that eventually you exhaust all the karma even of the physical body, at which point in time you could manifest rainbow body, which would be, I think, in a lot of ways, again, my thoughts, not Dan's and not lineage thoughts, would be very analogous to what we call ascension, perhaps, in a Urantia teaching. And we would save the word enlightenment for the very end of that path, at which point in time someone has actually cultivated rainbow body or manifest rainbow body. And it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting that these cosmic beings who have offered these teachings to us through Urantia are pointing to that as well. Because certainly at the time when these books were written, those would not have been things that were commonly known from the Dzogchen teachings in the West. So I find that intriguing.
I hear you saying we can redefine the term enlightenment to be that state of the rainbow when we get to rainbow body. Is that what you're saying?
Mm. The Tibetans define it in that way. The Tibetans are very clear that awakening and enlightenment are different phenomena. That awakening is that first taste and the stabilization of that awakening versus enlightenment, which would be preserved for someone who has cultivated rainbow body. So we would not use the term enlightenment for anybody unless they've cultivated rainbow body.
Oh, my goodness, that's great to hear that. That's very interesting. Well, then, there's a very strong parallel there. And so let me say just a bit more then about these 7 psychic circles and how it may.
Please, that'd be great. Yeah.
I like the circle because it's the encircle all, and you're drawing a circle around all the characteristics of a personality, or actually the line we call lines of intelligence. And a quick definition, lines of intelligence, is just the types of intelligence we have, such as cognitive and emotional intelligence. So the Urantia book actually does cite 3 lines of intelligence: willing, feeling, and thinking, and says that they have to rise together in robust fashion, and you can't be tardy in any one of these. They have to. They call it 7 psychic circles because you create a circle of holiness, so to speak, where you're not unbalanced. And a related phrase they use is personality unification, or cosmic individuation, which is my favorite phrase, cosmic individuation. So that you become a cosmic individual because nothing is left behind of your intelligences. All of them are developed to the highest point. And so if you were somebody who's cognitively highly developed, but your psychosexual life is far behind, there's no possible way you can get to this place. You have to clean that up, your psychosexual life. If your feeling life is highly developed, but you're lacking in life experience, as you know, as I was saying before, Jesus had all this life experience and had to encounter lots of elements of reality. So if you're deep feeling monastic, mystic, you cannot get to this, we'll call it rainbow body. You cannot get to this state of enlightenment. You have to bring up those other parts of the self that are falling behind, or never did, not falling behind, they were never progressed sufficiently for you to be a balanced personality. So the only people that have done that, according to the Urantia Book, are three, really. Enoch, Elijah, and Jesus got to that place, but it was a moment before his rainbow body, if you will, but he turned back, bodhisattva fashion, to serve humanity. So there you go. But the circles are important because they encircle all the lines of intelligence.
Can I pick up? Because I love this. It's so juicy. This is, Byron, there's so few people that are even interested in this kind of conversation. So to be able to be in dialogue with you about it, I'm so excited about it. So, it's interesting when we start to think about how the lines of the personality, just like you're speaking about, might relate to this process of awakening. And one of the things that I've been in dialogue about with some of my own teachers is that there's actually a parallel track that happens between waking up and growing up. And those seem to be distinct vectors for a period of time. But what seems like happens is that once you get to the point where you're exhausting karma, you actually have to go and do all of the emotional cleaning up work, just like you're saying, to actually liberate any aspects of the personality that actually aren't liberated. By doing that, it's actually the case that these two seemingly parallel lines for most of the path, once we get towards the karmic exhaustion point, actually seem to come together, where we can't actually make this as hard of a distinction between waking up and growing up. Although at the beginning of the path, we have to make that distinction. They're very different. But as we mature into the level we're talking about, into the level of beings who are actually gaining full enlightenment or full capacity for interdimensionality or rainbow body or ascension, then it seems like there is actually a way in which these things are very similar at that point. That we have to actually go up and do all of the integration work necessary so there's no karmic trace whatsoever left. And if we do that work, I think we'd have a result of exactly what you're talking about. There would be a state in which someone's lines had actually progressed to their highest and fullest capacity. Nothing would be left unturned or unintegrated. And I think it's a really interesting point that not too many people really speak about, but I think it seems vital that at least we in this conversation start to name that.
I'm going to invite people who are listening in to text us with questions. And in particular, if you're wondering about the definitions of terms that we're using, we kind of went pretty quickly into some deep stuff. I wonder, maybe we should.
Would it be okay, Byron? Can I say one piece about sort of this interspiritual, interreligious, translineage piece? Can I just say something about that? Because I think I might be able to frame things in a way. We use the idea of growing up as moving from egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to cosmocentric. But I like to sometimes, that's theoretical, I like to bring it home a bit more and to bring it into a concrete example. Sometimes it's easier for people to understand. So when we're at, let's just say, an ethnocentric worldview with our own spirituality, then what tends to happen is that we sit in our own camp and we're not really interested in what's happening in another camp. In fact, we think everybody else is wrong. So I might be in the Buddhist camp and I think the Christian camp is wrong. It's just one example. As we mature a bit and we move into a more world-centric view, what we sometimes do is we use the word tolerance. So we no longer think the other person's totally wrong, but like maybe we're willing to start like shaking hands and having a little bit of dialogue, but we don't want to get too dirty. We're like, we don't want to get too involved. Then if we progress a little bit further to what we call a postmodern level of development, what starts to happen is that we actually are interested in dialogue. We're interested in the other and we want to learn. We have some sort of exchange. And that's okay. It's interesting. People are doing that. It's necessary. But then something really interesting happens. We move from the sort of postmodern into this more integrative translineage space that you and I are really interested in. And I'll use sort of a provocative metaphor here, but it's provocative because I think it works. When we move into a translineage dialogue, what starts to happen is that we actually take our robes, whatever they are symbolizing, whatever tradition, we take them off. We actually start to stand naked together as human beings. And in that nakedness, we actually allow ourselves to enter into each other and dance together and actually allow ourselves to be transformed nakedly into something we didn't even know was possible. And that translineage dialogue and translineage practice space is so different than the just dialogical space we might see in sort of the popular version of sort of a pluralistic or postmodern spirituality. And I just wanted to name that to give people a taste. And those are the stages of growing up as they come into form. And we can do the same thing with the stages of waking up. They're just as juicy. But I just wanted to land it a bit more for the audience so they can start to feel the difference between an other that they don't want to touch, an other that they have tolerance for that they kind of touch, a dialogical space, and then standing naked and just being totally and radically blown away by someone else's being and what they have to say and teach you.
Beautiful. Well, it's so beautifully well said. Thank you so much. I see some people are asking questions. Somebody saying, Byron, please share with Dustin and all of us about your related understanding of the phrase Dustin mentioned, the supreme identity, the concept. Okay, so this is actually very important because it introduces a whole nother element that I'd like to see what you think, but we can circle back to what we're talking about. Since this is, I really want to give prominence to our audience here, is Donald Beauchamp. So Donald, the supreme identity notion in Islam, which is, he's referring to that. He's wondering if it has something to do with the supreme being in the Urantia revelation. So Dustin, I'm going to first define that, and then I want to ask you to tell us what you mean by supreme identity in Islam. So the supreme being in the Urantia revelation is like the deity of process theology. If you read some of that in Harvard, or whatever, the notion of evolutionary deity, that deity is evolving as we evolve. So it's co-evolving with humanity toward an endpoint of full integration with space-time, the space-time realms, to the extent that the deity becomes the embodiment of all the experience of all the beings on all the planets in the space-time galaxies, right? So it's cumulatively growing into this fulfillment of deity, so to speak. So just for Donald's, for clarification, Dustin, you mean by supreme identity the personal, the highest state of being of a person, or what is the meaning of that term?
Yeah, great question. And I love this. I love that you've brought in process theology here, but and that Urantia book really is able to accommodate that. So my understanding is that in the supreme identity, one would recognize oneself as non-separate from all of reality and all of existence, that there would be a sense of non-dual union with all of reality. So not just the supreme identity in some sort of individual consciousness or soul type way. This isn't the peak of the soul. This is actually a supreme identity in which the practitioner and the divine are not separate. So closer to a union with what sounds like maybe something like a supreme identity, although I'd want to make some important distinctions. So one of the things I love about what you said, Brian, is this idea of the universe actually evolving, and the universe evolving through the relative experiences of all the beings that are in it in a certain way. And I've always contemplated, if the individual path of awakening is one by which we come to recognize ourselves as this awakened awareness, and then we stabilize that, and then we exhaust all our karma, and we have this capacity for full enlightenment or ascension. Is the universe also going through a process like that? Is the supreme being itself also going through a process like that? Is there a way in which the supreme being actually does reach some sort of omega point, at which time the supreme being itself ascends into something? And is this an infinite process that unfolds, or is there a culmination point at which time perhaps we'd say, like in the more Hindu perspective, like the big game, the lila, the big play is over, and then we do it all again just because we can? And I'd be curious to know what the Urantia book has to say about that omega, if it says anything at all.
Oh, it says a lot, quite a bit. I think it's perhaps the most underestimated part of the Urantia book is its process theology, because it's difficult to understand, actually. Let's see, there's so many points to make here. Where shall I start? Let's come back to Donald's question, because the so-called supreme identity is in Sufi thought. What could translate into sort of Barbara Marx Hubbard's notion of the impulse of evolution within you, and you're fully identified with the imperatives of evolution. That so much so that you're not just world-centric, you're cosmocentric, you're cosmos-centered, and even better than that, you're God-centered, in the sense that God is evolving in these galaxies, right? So you are identified with the best interest of the galaxy, your galactic consciousness, so to speak. That would be a new identity, an identity with the Supreme, what we call in the Urantia text the Supreme, which has a very specific meaning, which is nothing other than the evolutionary aspect of deity, which is separate and distinct from the existential, eternal deity, which is existing from eternity, but has a portion, you might say, or it stems, something that stems from eternity into the Big Bang, you might say, so that we can have space-time in which to have these experiences and to have this dance. But meanwhile, the deity remains infinite and eternal. So how could that be? How could you have existential deity and evolutional deity at the same time? That's a problem not really solved in process theology, in my opinion. That is solved, I believe, in the Urantia revelation, because they show how to bridge these realms with this very advanced metaphysics. But anyway, coming back to the question, Jesus was someone who has had a supreme identity because he identified with the needs of his universe. And his incarnation was not just for our planet, but for the sheep of other folds, if you remember from the Bible. So the Urantia book makes it explicit that he was doing a performance, you might say, for beings on other planets for whom he is their creator. So that's why he has supreme identification, identifying with the needs of his universe. But the Urantia book is complicated because there's local universes, and it's only his local universe that he's concerned with, which is many millions of inhabited planets. So that's a lot of verbiage there, and maybe we should.
No, it's great. It's great, Byron. So I'd be curious as well. There's a teacher in the West who was popular for a number of years named Adi Da. Popular / controversial, and he has a teaching he calls the Alpha and the Omega teaching, and he talks about alpha cultures and omega cultures. I want to just tie that into this conversation. So he says alpha cultures are those particular traditions and teachings that focus on the original consciousness or original awareness, this sort of more the existential sort of version of the divine I think you were pointing to, which is the absolute. And then so we see this in various forms of Buddhism and Hinduism and some of these Eastern traditions. But then there are these other traditions that actually, he calls them omega cultures. And these omega cultures are about perfecting the world here and now and revealing something like the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven here. And that we have this amazing opportunity right now on our planet to begin to set the conditions for the first alpha omega culture to emerge, one that's both. One that has a full realization of the absolute, or this origin consciousness, origin awareness, like awakened awareness. And one that's consciously aware and intentionally evolving and creating a better and better world towards that omega point of that supreme being's fullest, pinnacle of possibility. And it sounds like, from my interpretation of what you've been saying and from the little bit that I've read, it sounds like the Urantia book has actually already given us a frame of both an alpha and omega culture, and that wherever the Urantia book came from, with these beings, perhaps are living with an understanding that an alpha and omega integration is in fact what a translineage practice for our planet would be. Would that be an accurate perception of what I've interpreted so far?
Yeah, and it's beautiful what Adidas said. I mean, I hadn't known that he actually made that distinction. And yes, it's exactly.
It's in a series of books called the Aletheon.
Never read those. So I'll look for that.
Yeah. And he says, I'll say one more piece, Byron, just because you appreciate it. He said, actually, when we look at the globe as a whole, we can see it as a yin-yang symbol. So where most Eastern traditions are alpha cultures, most Western traditions are omega cultures. But in the center of each, at the heart of each, we actually see the opposite. So the Greeks were actually an alpha culture, but then we emerged into an omega culture. And the Chinese culture, as he describes it, was actually an omega culture, but then all throughout the East it evolved into an alpha culture. So just interesting points there too. You can see the yin-yang symbol as the whole of the earth as well.
You know what? All of that would apply to the Urantia revelation, but in particular, it's amazing to note that they're wrapping a cosmology around this. So they actually give you sort of locations for the alpha and the omega. So or they explain the trajectory in ways I've never seen in any of their literature, and they're explaining the alpha in great detail and calling it the eternal central universe. So this is something Dwayne Elgin talks about as well, this mother universe that's always been there, his notion of the living universe, and out of which there's this potency in space-time that things emerge from, and it's like a mother universe. But the Urantia Book has great detail about this always existing eternal universe with a billion worlds, with beings who've always been there from eternity. And our work in space-time is to evolve toward this center and bring the experience of living in space-time to those eternal beings living in the central universe, and entering into a gigantic dance like the one you were talking about, a dialogue, where beings who are non-experiential learn from beings who are experiential. So there's this grand synthesis of the experiential life of the universes, of the galaxies, with the non-experiential perfect lives of the central universe. So we are moving inward to this heaven. It's like the seventh heaven, so to speak, in our ascension. And when we get to this central universe, we're going to be in dialogue for like billions of years, really, with them, until we get to the center of the center, which they call paradise. And there's the geographic location of the deities. And then we finally meet sort of face to face with the Father, Mother God. So that's the omega for the individual, but there's an omega also for the collective. And that is the self-realization of the Supreme Being, such that when all the beings on all the planets in space-time have hit enlightenment, all of them, then flashing into existence is a personification of that in a new deity. And this deity is the personality expression of all space-time evolution. So that it's really beautiful, very touching, and I'm choked up even talking about it, expression of the omega, so that the omega point is not just an abstraction, there's a person emerges who is the God of evolution in fulfillment, in completion. So there you go. That's and
what I love about it is just that it takes it all the way, at least as far as I can see, is all the way. Like, not just and from the individual to the collective. I really appreciate that. I've always felt that on our planet as well, that we're reaching a point in which we may, in small pockets, begin to function a bit more like organisms, less as individuals, more as organisms, as we function together collectively with this type of awakening. And of course, we'll always have our autonomy, but we can also then enter autonomously into group fields and group consciousness. And I've always said that eventually, it feels like where that's leading us is that collectively as a planet, we'll be able to, as a planet, enter into a group consciousness or an organismic consciousness of awakening, at which point in time, it feels like that's the prerequisite for us to really join consciously and intentionally to our larger galactic systems of consciousness and family and friends. But of course, we wouldn't be welcomed into that in a very conscious and in a major way. Maybe some of us will, or smaller groups, but as a planet, I mean, if we can't even function as a single unit, I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd be very helpful for us to be chaotically entering into some larger system. So I say that only because I think about that on a collective scale all the time. But I love the way in which the Urantia book speaks about the ways in which we collectively enter into that as an entire galactic and intergalactic and interuniversal and multi-universal system. It's really just beautifully. I'm glad to hear from you how potent that is in the teachings.
It may be helpful for you to know that the planet has been under quarantine. And so we're not really authorized for integration with the larger universe or the local universe because of our adverse history, deep history, prehistoric events that are a little bit beyond the scope of this discussion, just for you to know. And so we are not really close to that kind of planetary integration with extraplanetary beings, but they're now coming here and sort of penetrating the quarantine to teach us and pull us up and out of the chaotic state we're in, FYI. But
yeah, excellent.
Far down this road, and I was wondering if in the final time we have, we can come back to personal practices and nurture ourselves in distinctions you make about practice, and particularly between, just in real fundamental terms, between the difference between thought and awareness,
yes.
The witnessing consciousness. And if you could introduce us to that in a more practical sense, that would be really helpful.
I would love to. So let me give a theoretical distinction, and then I'll take us through just a short exercise. So one of the things that I've loved about the learning the precision of the Tibetans is that they make these distinctions that for many of us wouldn't be that obvious. And then, all of a sudden they point them out and they become, very obvious. So most of us collapse the idea of thought, attention, and awareness. We just sort of assume that all of these things are the same. But as we begin to practice, we start to understand that, wow, these things can all be distinguished. So let me give you some theoretical distinctions. So attention is like a flashlight. Attention is something you take a beam of light and you shine it onto something. And when you direct your attention to something or a flashlight beam to something, you illuminate that particular something to the exclusion of everything else. So that's attention. Thought would be this idea of a flashlight. The flashlight, a thought is the name or the idea of what we give to the particular thing that we're doing or the object, etc., or the object we're letting it upon. And then finally, awareness is this more open field that all of that arises within, that's also knowing. It's a knowing field that within which attention directs and thought arises. So let me just do a quick visualization with you all, and this will help us bring things a bit home. So if the users and the viewers could just close your eyes for a moment. Just imagine for a moment now that you are outside and you're underneath a wide open sky. The sky is full of stars. And standing next to you is a dear friend. And then imagine for a moment that friend all of a sudden points his or her hand up into the sky and says, wow, look at the moon. And in that moment, you turn your attention to find the moon. You find this glowing silver white disk in the sky. And you say, wow, that moon looks incredible. And you sit locked in that moon for a moment. And then you simply relax. Relax your awareness. And you allow yourself to take in everything. The whole sky, all of your sensations, all of your thoughts. Just taking in everything as a whole. Good, and that simple metaphor, you can open your eyes now. That simple metaphor actually makes the distinction between each of those pieces. So when your friend points out the moon, what you do is you direct your attention, like directing a flashlight. You search through the sky until you find the moon and you lock on with your attention. This thought that there's a moon, and you say, wow, what a moon, or he even said the word moon, you knew what you were looking for. That's a thought. It's a conceptual idea. Then as you relax, you just take in the whole of everything that's there, your own sensations, the sky, everything else. This is more like a field type of awareness that we'd call awareness. And so those distinctions and distinctions like that are things that we learn along that path of waking up. Because waking up isn't about developing a more complex or sophisticated worldview or a more complete system of how we're orienting towards each other and our way of making sense of the world. But it's really about understanding what's happening in our own mind, understanding what's happening in our own awareness. And we often say that that path of waking up takes a series of steps. So since we've introduced awareness, let me just unpack that a tiny bit more, Byron. And that's that awareness usually is confused with thought, as we've just seen. But as we deepen, we also recognize that awareness and emotion aren't the same. That emotion arises within this open field of awareness, but it's not the same as awareness. We also begin to realize that our personality, so Byron and Dustin are these funny characters that arise within awareness, although we're not exclusively identified with them. And as we progress even further, we even start to do the same with time and space, is that we understand that even the coming and going of time, and even a sense of being localized, that all arises within this non-local, open, ever-present field of awareness. And we even can start to realize through meditative practice that individual consciousness, a sense of being separate, even as a non-local open awareness, even that can fade, or that can be transcended and included, until we recognize that there's nothing separate, there's nothing else other than this awareness. And once we get into some of those more non-dual phases of that, we start to point towards something we call awakened awareness. And that's a very simple articulation of waking up, but we can find paths like that through different traditions. And we can find that sometimes they use that first person practice, like tracking awareness, but sometimes they use a second person practice, like how do we, in relationship to the divine, start to close that gap more and more through our devotion, through our love, through our care, until that gap actually becomes indistinct. Or how do we, through contemplation, how do we, through thinking in a third person about reality, how do we come to such a state of wonder that there's no difference between the wonder and the cosmos, that we actually begin to live in a state of awe or miraculousness. And so it doesn't matter if we take the first person awareness track or the second person relational track or the third person contemplative track, they all can and have the capacity to take us into a deeper state of waking up. So I don't want to go on too long. I just wanted to make sure I give the viewers and the listeners a little taste of how amazing and distinctions, how helpful distinctions are. They're not just theoretical, they're practical.
Totally brilliant. Thank you so much. And I want to recommend and commend to everybody to read the first of your books, which has a lucid presentation of what you just talked about. But that's just one of the
very much so.
And that book is Streams of Wisdom, which I am a student of, and I've gone through it twice, and I'm going to go through it again. So I'm going to translate that a little bit into Urantia language. How fruitful that is. That in the Urantia Book teaching, you know, there's the notion of thought as being essential for orientation in the universe. Mm-hmm. So we can, it's a very thought-provoking text that's trying to get us to grow up into the universe and become cosmic citizens. But what can happen?
We have to learn what a moon is, Byron. We have to learn what a moon is in order to orient ourselves, you know, in other words.
Right, so what that is, but the point here being that Urantians need to meditate because they're so thoughtful, but they need to recognize the moon, the light of consciousness as such, distinct from their ideas and distinct from the Urantia text, from all of it. And that is necessary for balance in your consciousness, because if we're caught up in our thoughts and our feelings and totally identified with them, we're at a fairly gross level of consciousness. So I think there's energetic stages, and I think that's what you also say, that the gross level is distinct from the subtle, distinct from the causal, as energetic sort of states, or not states, but ways of being. Or how would you put that?
Well, there's both. We can look at those from the perspective of levels of awareness. Those are levels of sort of deeper aspects of self or identity. Or we can look at those as realms or energy fields that we're having as states arising in the sort of environments. We can look at it from both those perspectives, just as you said. But I would have to say too, if people aren't meditating, one of the motivations could be just to do it as a favor to the people around you, because one of the things that meditation does help is it makes us just less reactive and more pleasant to be around. Because once we start to become aware that our own awareness and our emotional reactivity aren't the same thing, once we have a bit more spaciousness around our emotional self, people around us start thanking us for meditating. So just even on a very practical level, do it for the people around you.
The Urantia Book depicts Jesus as going apart to meditate all the time. But there isn't a practice manual that comes with the Urantia Book, as there is with, say, Course in Miracles. They have the sort of the theoretical, and they have the practical. And we don't have that yet. So that's another of the reasons I want to interview you to help folks to kind of get a handle on what our tradition.
I don't know what kind of time we have, Byron, but I could offer a 10-minute meditation that people could take with them and have in their pocket. And if we can't do it now, perhaps we could do it another time and send out to your friends and audience. But there are some very easy ways that we can do that.
Yeah, let's go for it. Please do. Yeah, because we've gone an hour. We often go much more than that. So we're game.
Great. Well, I like that you're a committee of one. So as long as no one's protesting on the text messages, then
very few on here, but there can be people watching. Probably hundreds of people watching afterwards.
Great. So do you want me to offer it now, Byron, or you want to go into any other theoretical points before? Because this would be a nice way to end. So let's take it home with the meditation. It's leaves people with a nice flavor.
Let's do that. Let me just say a few more theoretical points that in the language of the Urantia Book, there's an indwelling spirit. We're not identified with it. We're identified with our basic thoughts. And so they don't use the word identification, but they really mean this. So we're identified with our material, what they call the material mind, which is the mind, the brain, really, what the brain's producing. So we're moving our identification from thought to the soul, and the soul is the subtle realm, what integral theory would call the subtle realm, or Vedanta would call the subtle energetic realm. And so we're trying to move toward identification with the indwelling spirit of God, and that they call that communion or worship. So when we're worshiping, we're moving out of the mental realm through the subtle realm to the highest realm of God consciousness. So I just wanted to throw that language in there for our Urantia folks who use that language, and then turn this over to you and give us the exercise.
Okay, great. So I'll just give a 1-minute opening, and that's that one of the things I found really useful in working with people is that using the physical body as the gateway to meditation is sometimes easier, particularly for those of us who are really theoretical or conceptual, who might spend a lot of times in our heads. Something about being in the body brings us a little bit out of our heads and a bit more here into the present, because we can feel our body. Our body's tangible. And so what I'd like to introduce to all of you is a very simple meditation that helps us to investigate the ways in which the boundaries of our body aren't quite as real as we take them. We usually assume that the body, ends here with this encapsulated skin, and that's the extent to which our awareness exists. But with a very simple practice that I'll introduce to you, we'll find that there is actually a much broader sense of awareness or sense of self that we can begin to meditate with and as. And doing so creates a lot more spaciousness in our life and our emotions and our thoughts. And it can be quite pleasant as well. So that's what I'd like to take you all through. And so this meditation will be short. It's amazing how efficient we can be when we're working with direct experience. So though anybody who has any sort of fear about long meditations, you can put those aside. This won't be long. This will just be efficient. So start by sitting up so that you feel nice and proud. There can almost be a quality of dignity or majesty in how you're sitting. And allow the back of your neck to elongate and reach the top of your head upward towards the ceiling of the sky. And for this meditation, just placing your hands on your knees. And start by feeling the points of contact as your hands press against your knees. So noticing the sensations, noticing the pressure as your hands press against your knees. Just feeling. It's very simple. Feeling your hands against your knees. Now just notice that anytime you're feeling, you're also aware. That awareness and feeling arise together. So we'll call this feeling of your hands against your knees, we'll call it awareness feeling, or feeling awareness. So just continue to feel this feeling awareness of your hands against your knees. So this is a stage-by-stage meditation. If you feel like this is your edge, if you're having troubles even concentrating at this level, just stay here. Practice with this level of practice. Feeling awareness of your hands against your knees. And if this is straightforward for you, and you have a sense for it, just keep following along to stage 2. So continue to feel this feeling awareness of your hands against your knees. And then simultaneously, feel awareness as your sit bones push against your chair or your cushion, or wherever you're sitting. So you're feeling your hands against your knees, and simultaneously feeling your sit bones against your cushion or chair. You're feeling both sets of feeling awareness at the same time. So it's like a field of feeling awareness. And at first, you might toggle back and forth between your hands and your knees and your sit bones in the chair. But to really master this second stage, you begin to feel this feeling awareness like one field, feeling both sets of sensations simultaneously. Good, and if that's straightforward enough for you, if you can feel that directly in your experience, come with me to stage 3. Otherwise, just keep practicing there. So stage 3, feel your whole body like a single field of feeling awareness. Your whole body as a single field. So you're not jumping around from your feet to your arms, to your head, to your body. You're trying to feel the whole body all at once. One field of feeling awareness. And then feel the outside edges of your skin. Almost like your skin is becoming porous. And this field of feeling awareness is beginning to glow, slightly larger than your skin. So you're feeling awareness, glowing, slightly larger than your skin. It's one field of feeling awareness. And this is another pausing point. If you'd like to stay here, you're free to. If you want to keep coming on the journey, there's a few more steps. Just keep following along. So now turn your attention to the top of your head. And just allow the top of your head to gently open so that this field of feeling awareness is also above you. So you're feeling awareness up. The same field of feeling awareness up is the same field of feeling awareness throughout your whole body. There's no boundaries. And then feeling awareness in the lower half of your body. and feeling awareness down. So allowing the lower half of the body to open, just feeling awareness down below the body. Like you're sitting on feeling awareness. And then feeling the front of your body. And just feeling the whole front of the body opening, feeling awareness forward. So opening to the same field of feeling awareness, up, through the body, down, opening forward. One field of feeling awareness. And then feeling all of your back body now. And feeling the back of your body opening and feeling awareness back. Opening to the field of feeling awareness back. And then feeling your right side of the body, allowing the right side of your body to open and feeling awareness to the right. And then feeling awareness opening through the left side of your body. Feeling awareness to the left. No boundaries, no edges, just open feeling awareness. And then see if you can feel this feeling awareness open in all directions, up, down, forward, back, right, left, so that all directions are open evenly. And if one particular direction feels less open, just give it your attention. And you'll notice that immediately the boundaries dissolve and it opens up. It's all one field of open feeling awareness. And for tonight, I'll just take you one step further for those who are still with me. So take the view that feeling awareness is open like a sphere. But unlike a sphere, no edges or boundaries. So feeling awareness is open, but there are no edges or boundaries to the sphere. And if you think there are any edges or boundaries, just go look for them and they'll recede. Just open feeling awareness. And when you're ready, just take a nice deep inhale into your belly. Exhaling out. And that's a short introduction to a body-based open awareness practice. And there are quite a few more stages after that, but that's good for a video cast like this. And the cool things about meditations like this, Byron, is that they don't have to end when the meditation ends. Like to whatever degree, even as we're having this conversation, to whatever degree we can stay open, wonderful. Let's stay open together. And all the listeners can stay open, and it's not something that ever has to end. We can start to blur the distinction between when we're sitting and meditating and the views that we're taking in everyday life. It's helpful to know that that's possible.
And if you folks want to make some comments, I think, Alec, we could open this up if somebody would like to. Why don't we unmute it, actually, Alec, so that there's only a few folks on. And see if they have any questions. I'm going to share something. Donald, thank you for your great comments. Go. Donald, go ahead. I don't think he's unmuted on his own machine.
Yeah, I just unmuted everyone. So they should be able to ask a question.
Oh, just a small comment, just as I've been trying to get involved in a more regular prayerful meditation daily, I found myself thinking about a good discipline or protocol to use, and you've very much brought a delight to my life with going through that very short but illustrative way of using your mind to explore the rest of the universe in one sitting. So thank you so much, Dustin. Really appreciate
Donald,
it.
thank you.
Very
Beautiful.
timely in my own life. I'll let it go at that.
Oh, thank you, Donald.
Anyone else? How about you, Linda? Anything? Guess not. Judy?
So Byron, maybe since we know Donald's there and he's alive, Donald, I just maybe say two comments, three. So one is just thanking you again for that kind remark. The second is that these types of meditations, like feeling your body, maybe feeling an awareness larger than your body, that they can really be maintained even right now. So even as you're sitting there now and you're listening to this conversation, and as we wrap up, that the meditations don't have to end, that you can maintain that sense of openness, and that sense of openness then begins to have all these incredible beneficial ripple effects in your life. So that's the first comment. And the second comment is that there are a few very distinct stages after that. They get more and more wonderful. So I just would want to encourage you to not stop there. That's all.
Understood. And to get a more full explanation of the various levels, what book do you have on hand that could be illustrative of that? What would you recommend for a newbie integral meditator, Urantia Book reader?
Sure. Definitely the one that Byron mentioned, Streams of Wisdom, would be a good reference point for that. But also, if you ever want to reach out to me personally, you're welcome to do that. Dustin DiPerna at gmail.com.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Byron, I just want to thank you again for opening up this opportunity. It's fun to dance together. I look forward to all the ways that we can do that and continue to do things together here in the Bay and really continue the dialogue. I mean, the Urantia dialogue is so rich, and I'm just grateful that you're doing this work and that so many people are benefiting from it. I hope that your book sells far and wide.
Yeah, there's so much more to talk about. And in closing, I just want to encourage you guys to get Dustin's book, Streams of Wisdom, and take it in, and then work with Dustin. He works one-on-one. He does that online. You can work with him, and just as Donald said, maybe he'd like to learn more about the techniques and also the distinctions. So please do that. So the website, again, the best place to access your work is which site?
DustinDiPerna.com. DustinDiPerna.com. That's the easiest way to stay up to date with what I'm doing, what I'm teaching. I was just invited to teach at Esalen. I just taught at Esalen for a weekend, just got invited to teach a week long there. So really excited about that.
And you're teaching at
next year.
Now, is that right?
Yeah, I teach at Stanford now as well. Yeah, I teach technology augmented meditation. We're exploring the relationship between technology and consciousness and these kind of things.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Dustin, and congratulations for your wonderful work. And thanks for being in dialogue with Urantia Revelation. And we'll keep it up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a total honor, Byron. And I assume everybody here has the book, but in case they don't, go buy Byron's book. He's a total genius, and he's doing such a great service to the Urantia work and to integral theory and these things as well. So pleasure to be with you, Byron.
Thank you so much. One more thing. I want to send you a gift.
Oh, sure.
You have a Urantia book at home, do you?
I do, actually, Byron. You actually gave me my first copy. And and it's been great. It's been really great. That's you and the book itself are my two greatest sources of wisdom. So thank you. You've been my tutor.
All right. Good night now. And thanks for taking time from your family.
Thank you both very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
Oh, I just figured out how to go to my privacy mode and unmute myself, which is pretty unusual in life. But I want to thank you both very much. I've been a student of the Urantia book for about 2 years now, and I've read probably 80% of it. And I really like the integral concept. It kind of brought it alive to me tonight, hearing you both talk about it in different ways. And so I appreciate very much the partnership this evening.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank
Stay
you.
in touch, Judy.
I will.
All the best, everybody. Blessings to you. Thank you again, Dustin. Bye-bye now.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Byron. Bye.